This is literally one of my favorite questions to answer, and I get this question a lot, whether it's from my family or friends, just in my personal life. So I figured I'd just record a video and just describe how I like to present why Germany was so powerful in World War II. Because I get excited to talk about this. Actually, there's jokes about that I see on TikTok telling women to ask their boyfriend about World War II, and they get so excited. That's literally me. So I'm obviously not a historian. I don't like dig in deeply. You can present different arguments in a lot of different ways throughout history, and why certain things played out the way they did. This is just the way I like to present it. But go ahead and let me know in the comment section down below how you would describe this. So to a history fan, just your average everyday, specifically American, this is a confusing topic. It's a little bit weird, especially when you study or not even study. A lot of these people, they don't know much about history, and that's totally understandable. That is okay. So I can understand you see World War I and then you see World War II, quite the big difference, especially when looking at the maps and seeing how big Germany got. It can be weird. Like, how did they take this big L in World War I and then almost manage, I don't want to say win World War II, because I don't think they would have. I think the best bet would them is they could have delayed their inevitable defeat, in my opinion. But that's a conversation for a whole different video. But they were very close to, quote-unquote, winning World War II, specifically in 1940. I show the map in my main channel videos all the time, where Germany just basically Germany and her allies control the entire continent, besides the British Isles. Now, this is before their invasion of the Soviet Union, so that's Operation Barbarossa, and this is before the U.S. declared war and, Pearl Harbor in Japan and, all that stuff. So in 1940, when Britain stood alone, Germany basically had the whole continent, and it looked like they were going to win, quote-unquote win, and there were even talks about the British just white piecing, just like, hey, just leaving Germany alone. And I know that was a big internal thing going on because there was no U.S. involved. They were helping under the surface, but they weren't directly in the fight. And then Germany and the Soviet Union had held the whole kind of a non-aggression pact, the Molotov-Ribbentrop pact. So that wasn't a problem at that point in the year 1940. So remember, World War II starts September 1st, 1939 with the invasion of Poland. And if you look at those time lapses you can find on YouTube of World War II every day, it's insane the speed at which Germany gets so big. And I kind of already made a reference to it. Part of the problem for the Allies in the very beginning, and again, for history people, which more than likely you're a history person if you're watching this, but for the non-history people, it doesn't make any sense. But keep in mind the previous massive conflict in Europe, World War I. When you watch the time lapses of every day of World War I, specifically in the Western Front, I'm really talking about the Western Front, so that's Germany versus France, it was trench warfare, and nothing was really happening. And remember, on a technological level, we're just starting to really get into the whole warplanes and tanks, and there were still, cavalry charges at that time. World War I was a crazy war, but the technology that was like the foundation to World War II was still at that developmental level, and that was a really big issue for the Allies, specifically France and the British, in the beginning of World War II, because they were not ready for that sort of warfare. Now, the way that a lot of people present it is that they thought World War II would be fought like a World War I. I don't like to just say that. They were definitely keeping up to date with some of the technological advancements, but they were not prepared for the blitzkrieg strategy that Germany was going to employ. Remember that after World War I, too, Germany was messed up. You have the Weimar Republic, all that inflation that's going on. They're forced to, that's obviously why why the German people were so angry. They were forced to pay for all the damages of World War I. They were very angry. So that confuses people even more when they see how powerful Germany got in World War II. But anyways, Blitzkrieg. Now, from a tactical level, I don't like to really talk about this too much, but of course, Blitzkrieg, from a tactical level, they talk about sending in planes first, then tanks, then the infantry soldiers. You can find GIFs about it, GIFs. But what the real thing is, and the best phrase that I've heard to describe it is, in World War I, the tanks would move at the pace of a walking soldier. And in World War II, the soldier moved at the pace of a running tank. And that's the biggest difference. That's why from September 1st, 1939 to June, when the Germans walked into Paris and it was just the UK left, they took over an entire continent because the speed at which they were able to do it. If I'm France and I literally watched, because obviously there was still, the generation from the Great War was still around during World War II. And I remember the whole trench warfare thing and the front lines barely moving. And it's just like, that's part of the reason the whole Maginot Line thing was built and stuff like that. I would not have been prepared either for the speed at which Germany was going to move and punch so hard, because that was the thing. That's why they were knocking out countries in literal days, like literally days, because everything became more mechanized. Everything was just way fast. Soldiers walking wasn't even like the pace anymore, because you could put a soldier in a motorcycle, or that's a different sort of division, but you could put a soldier in tanks and trucks, and you could just move them really quickly. They were also really good at supply lines at that point. There's also really great documentaries about that, is supplying to the front lines, because resources is a really big thing. Logistics is a big thing that I try to cover more and more nowadays when it comes to war. The logistics of warfare, not necessarily just the tactics. So when Germany is like moving into enemy countries, they're doing it so fast that the Allies in the very beginning, they couldn't keep up, because they're still kind of like at this like we're gonna move these soldiers over here. They weren't prepared for like an entire division to be able to move at like 40 or 50 miles an hour in the course of like a day or something like that. They're moving like miles and miles, days into territory. And then you obviously have, if you're a Hoi 4 player, you have a bunch of divisions becoming overrun, because that's how fast the Germans were able to move around, Allied divisions, surround them, cut them off from their resources, and then bam, you have like thousands and thousands of soldiers surrendering. So that like really messed them up. And Britain is extremely lucky, because they have that small strip of ocean that separates them from continental Europe. Whenever I see those scenarios of like, what if Britain wasn't an island or something like that? First of all, it's kind of a dumb thought process, because Britain would not exist the way it exists today if it didn't have the English Channel, if it didn't exist on an island by itself. But even Britain themselves would have been taken out if for some reason the British Isles were connected to continental Europe, because they weren't prepared for it. If you've seen the movie Dunkirk, they were clearly not prepared for it. They were very lucky they were able to escape off of the continental mainland landmass back to their island. Because the thing that really kept them safe was their navy. Germany was not going to be able to compete with the British Navy. The British have always used that policy of like, hey, we're going to just build a bunch of boats. The British Army is not necessarily what they're going to focus on. They're just going to focus on protecting. That's why their empire got so big too, is because not only do they need a navy to protect their home base, the British Isles, but also to be able to travel around the world, to be able to conquer people in India and Australia and all these different places. So it's just their navy. But without all that, Germany probably would have taken London as well if it was for some reason connected, because nobody was prepared. Even during Operation Barbarossa, look how far the Germans moved in to the Soviet Union territory. Obviously, the thing they underestimated, which we talk about all the time, is how cold it got over there. And once things slowed down, that was kind of the doom I mean, that was the kind of the biggest mistake that the funny mustache man, the weird skinny mustache man, made was his declaration of war on the Soviet Union. But that's a whole other argument that he had to do that and all this other stuff. But I really like talking about how much the technology changed from World War I to World War II. I mean, I can't even imagine what it would have been like to have been a soldier or like a general on the Allies' side in 1939 and to just see this massive German military move so quickly, moving through the Ardennes forest. Remember, they moved around the Maginot Line so quickly. The French knew they were going to have to do that, but they weren't expecting that they were going to do it, and they were going to do it so quickly, just boom, immediately walk into Paris. So it's interesting because you got to keep that in mind when it comes to warfare now. I mean, it's very clear that you see it. There were so many examples during the Cold War where like every single little technological advancement that either the Soviets or the U.S. would do, the other side would have to like scramble to find a way to counteract that, or you can see it a lot in aviation and aircraft during the Cold Wars in the 1950s, during the 1950s and 60s, whenever there was like this new bomber, this long-range bomber, or the fastest fighter jet, the other side would immediately try to come up with some sort of response. And part of that is just the massive difference between World War I and World War II, and the fear that there was going to be this new technology that was going to completely change warfare, and it was going to cause nations to conquer other nations in the span of days, like Germany was doing. It's funny, I like to do this thought experiment sometimes. Like, if you went back in time just like maybe 200 years ago, and you put, maybe 300 years ago, let's just say 300 years ago, and you put a battleship with unlimited fuel, unlimited resources, and like a bunch of people, a full crew inside, that single battleship would literally rule the world. Like, there would be no way to stop it. I know this is like not even a fair thought experiment, because what do you mean it has unlimited fuel? What do you mean? I mean, does the crew have food? Does all this stuff? Just say that resources is not an issue for this battleship. That single battleship would conquer the world. There wouldn't be almost anything you could do. 300 years ago, they did still have pretty massive boats with cannons on it. We might have to go back to 500 years ago. But I like to think about people without a navy. I mean, and that's how the British were able to conquer. Think about the way the British did. The British, from an island off the coast of Europe, was able to conquer all of South Asia and all these different people groups. You're not just talking about India, you're talking about Pakistan and Bangladesh and Myanmar as well, because technology was it got to the point where only a couple people could conquer and control millions because of technology and how fast that moved, and how the rest of the world was not ready for it. That's how all of Europe pretty much took over the world and things like that. So that's a whole other thing. The differences, between World War I and World War II technology, and how you can think about things today, why we do certain things, and how that's always in the back of a lot of people's minds is how quickly Germany almost took everything over.